Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us again for this episode. And I wanted to start out and just say a big, huge thank you. There's some great people who've really helped out. I'm doing some work up in Vacaville, California, and it's an underserved community where people are really struggling financially and health-wise. We're seeing an epidemic of diabetes and health problems that are devastating, right? So, when I saw their break room up at this company, Vacaville Fruit Company, a little shout out to them because they care about their employees and they're helping. I'm not sponsored by them, but I'm consulting with them right now, trying to help out. I felt overwhelmed, and so I looked at their break room, and and I couldn't believe it. Everything was garbage food. So these people who work hard all day and are sleep deprived and stressed, they're not getting good nutrition. So people are calling it sick. You start having other health problems, losing people to diabetes complications. And so the owner of the company reached out to me and said, hey, I don't care what it costs. I want to help these people. They got them continuous glucose monitors. They paid for labs and for them to go through my program. And, I reached out to some people in the community and said, hey, can we help? Because it takes a community. So who responded? Health Code. Dr. Ben Bickman, who is a hero of mine, said, hey, well, how can I help? I can lecture, I can come and do whatever, let's get them some product and see what they can do. So Health Code Shakes helped out. Rosette's, who's the wife of my partner on the Low Carb MD podcast, she said, let me send some snack, low carb snacks, cake mix where they could celebrate birthdays and have cookies and things like that. And of course, my sponsor here is Simply Snacking. Very proud. She sent them a ton of samples, and I'm seeing their continuous glucose monitors staying flat. And I'm seeing sugars go from 246 down to less than 100 consistently. And so I just wanted to give a shout out. I'm only sponsored by Simply Snacking, but everyone else jumped in to help. Ben Bakikio, 15 Minutes to Fitness, he jumped in and said, hey, I'll lecture them on exercise. I really want to help. So what I'm saying is all these great people are coming out of the woodwork and wanting to help a community. And that's what it's going to take. We have to invest in other people. And that's what this podcast is about. And I feel very passionate about that, and I'm proud of these companies. And I want you to support these companies because they're giving, they're helping, they're like-minded. Sue at Simply Snack and I talked to her and said, look, this is a small podcast. We're just getting it off the ground. It's going to be a net loss for you probably for a while, right? And she says, I believe in your cause. I believe in helping people. And so when you're combined with people like this, you can't fail. So I just want to give a shout out to those companies. They didn't do it for me to talk on the podcast. No one even mentioned it. They said, how can I help? And I think if more of us are like that, we're going to be successful. We're going to do better and we're going to help more people. So thank you for listening. And thank you for your continued support. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. I caught the big fish today. This is JT, Jared Teixeira. I know I'm going to say your last name wrong, but you'll probably say my last name wrong too. But man, I missed you on Low Carb MD. I was bummed when I missed that episode, but I listened to it. I loved it. Episode number 120 for people who follow that podcast. JT, that's easier for me, man. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, man.
Man, you have a story. I mean, just in a nutshell, tell people, I know they can go back and listen to Low Carb MD to catch that side of the story, but tell people in a nutshell your story of, getting your health back and what you're doing now to help other people. And then I want to go all the way back to, childhood and all the stuff that you've been through, because I know you have quite a story. And I think people who are following you, I think they'll have much more respect when they hear where you came from and what you're doing now. So welcome, man. It's an honor to have you.
Like I said, man, I'm happy to share. And basically from the health and fitness side of things, when I was in high school, I wasn't an athlete. I was just regular kid, right? Played video games and was more of a book nerd and that kind of thing. And when I graduated high school, I made this decision to go into the Marine Corps, prior to graduating. And so everybody thought I was crazy because I had no real athletic experience or anything like that. But I basically got ready the day after I turned 18. I shipped out, and that was my first exposure to a real physical culture, some structured exercise, physical training. And one of the things that I realized later after I got out of the Marine Corps and, carried on with life is that we're all products of our habits. Like we all have like wants and desires and things that we want to do and accomplish. But the main reason that most of us won't accomplish those things is because we don't build the positive habits to get us to accomplishing those things, right? So we want something, but we have these negative habits that we, whether it's diet, productivity, all this other stuff. And the reason I mention that is in the military, I was forced to exercise, coming from a background of never being an athlete, never exercising. And I had no choice for 4 years. So being physical and exercising just became a part of my daily life. And so as I got out of the military, that stuck with me. And obviously my activity level, and I was, 20 years old, granted, was so high in the military, I could eat whatever I wanted. And I never got fat, right? I wasn't a soda person. I kind of, when I started working out in the military, I got a little into health and fitness. And so I cut out soda, cut out a lot of like cakes, and I wasn't much of a sweet person anyways, but I ate a ton of fast food. It wasn't like I was eating healthy. I just cut out mostly sugars, right? And, but I got out at 21 years old and continued eating lots of fast food. I mean, I was a single dude. I wasn't cooking very much. Like everything was eating out, So like, I don't want to put any false pretenses that I was eating healthy. I just happened to not be a sugar guy, but I was eating like back in the day.
French fries and burritos, so like breakfast burritos, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, and the thing is, in the military, we ran so much, I could not really gain much muscle. I was just lean and, 3 to 5 miles a day, sometimes six miles on a Friday or whatever. So once I got out of the military, I was like, okay, no more running. I'm gonna put on some muscle, and I had a hard time gaining weight, and so I was just eating like I would get the 2 for 2 Big Macs back when they were 2 for 222 or whatever it is, and so I would like that would be lunch, 2 Big Macs, and then I would be like, oh, I'd be a protein shake between that and dinner. Then dinner would be like this giant plate from KFC, or so it's all total crap, from a food quality standpoint. But I gained a little bit of weight slowly, and then something happened. I met my wife. We ended up having our first kid when I was 26, and my wife got pregnant, and I gained all the weight. Like something just happened. I can't really explain it. It doesn't make sense to me because biologically she changed, not me. But I gained like almost 50 pounds in 2 years. The year she was pregnant and that first year after my daughter was born, with a new baby at home, my activity level went down a little bit, but I was still active. I was still working out. And I went from like a 30-inch waist to almost a 40-inch waist. I gained 50 pounds at 5'8". I went to the doctor I get my blood work checked once a year. I went to the doctor and they're like, whoa, you're obese, And I was, at that point, I wasn't like bodybuilder, jacked obese with a little bit of fat. I was like lots of fat with a little bit of muscle obese. And so that kind of woke me up. And my wife had been telling me all this time, like, hey, you're getting fat. And in my mind, I'm like, no, I'm not getting fat. You're crazy. I'm just gaining muscle, And so, but she was right. I went to the doctor. It kind of made me reassess. And then she had taken some pictures. We went a little weekend trip to the Central Coast here in California, and I had no shirt on. And when I saw the pictures get developed, I was like, wow, it like hit me. Yes, I'm fat. Like I got to do something. So that was my first, like, up until that point, I was one of those people that thought, oh, I work out a lot, therefore I'm gonna eat whatever I want and I'm fine. And so I always equated people that were overweight as just being lazy and not getting after it, not being physically active enough. And so what happened to me was my physical activity levels, especially before my daughter was born, they didn't change at all, yet I was getting fat. And so, whether it was an age-related change in metabolism or I'm not 100% sure, but with my wife having cravings and my food intake went up even more, whatever it was, a combination of factors.
Plus stress, plus not sleeping as much. There's so many factors that are, it's such a, you can't just say, okay, it's just one thing that did it, right?
Right. Yeah. It's probably a multitude. And the thing is, I was the guy that worked out an hour and a half a day, 5 days a week, but still got fat. So I can tell people for sure from personal experience, yes, you can, no matter how much, to an extent. Okay. What I would say is for most people, you can't out exercise a bad diet, because the amount of exercise that's required is not realistic for most people to put in. And the reason I kind of, quantify it like that is you've got some athletes like a Michael Phelps, and yes, he's young, I get all that, but you've got athletes that will eat 8,000 calories a day, 6,000 calories a day, and they're lean, but they're also working out literally 4 to 6 hours a day. That's not realistic for almost anyone. So there's a small percentage of people who, especially when they're younger, I think can out exercise a crappy diet, but it's an incredible minority. So when you're a regular person and you fall into that trap of thinking like, oh, well, I'll just run more, I'll just train, I'll just lift more, it's a slippery slope. So that's where I was. I got fat. And then at that point, this is 2009 or 8, maybe 2008. And so back then it was pretty much, if you cleaned up your diet, it was like egg whites and oatmeal, chicken and brown rice with broccoli. It was like for lack of a better word, the traditional fitness diet or whatever that was in all the magazines. So I did that. I was not eating out, Tupperwaring all my food, reheating chicken, cooking like 15 chicken breasts at a time. It was brutal. But I got down from like almost 220 pounds to like 195, and then I just couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't sustainable. I was like, dude, I just can't eat more egg whites. I can't eat more plain oatmeal, more, chicken, broccoli, whatever. So I got turned on to this book called The Warrior Diet. I read The Warrior Diet by a guy named Ori Hofmeekler. And that diet, or that book rather, it wasn't very technical. It didn't really dig into much science or anything, but it opened my eyes to the idea of a more ancestral eating pattern and, not eating 6 times a day. And when I read that book, I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And I wanted to really put it to the test. So I just went with 20 and 4 fasting. So I went straight from eating 6 meals a day and the typical fitness diet to 20 and 4 intermittent fasting. And I went from the 195, I went down to like 172 pounds and very lean in like 6-7 weeks. I mean, it was fast.
Yeah.
So when I saw how, at that point, I believed all that, if you're not eating every 3 hours, you're not stoking your metabolism, you're going to be catabolic, you're going to lose muscle mass, all the stuff that people would say. And it was even worse, you're talking 10, 12 years ago. So I realized that all that stuff's not true, because I'm like, okay, I just did this and none of that applied to me. And that kind of made me start looking into scientific references about intermittent fasting, 20 and 4 fasting, alternate day fasting. So that's what sent me down the rabbit hole of like trying to read into the science of different ancestral eating patterns, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so since then, that's pretty much where I've been at. I haven't done anything close to a bodybuilding style diet or anything like that since 2009, maybe. So yeah, I'm like 12 years probably since various intermittent fasting and low carb variations over that time period.
Yeah, and I've seen you just be a voice of reason. You go, okay, look, here's what works for you, and not saying, okay, you all have to do my workout, you all have to do my stuff. And I think what's amazing about your workout is you're using body weight, and anyone can do that. You can't say, well, I can't afford to, do your program. And you do a lot of stuff on YouTube. You've really reached out to a lot of people. And I think, once you found the answer, you wanted to bring other people with you, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, so before I had kids, and I find most people, or not, I don't know if it's necessarily most, but a lot of people, when they don't have kids, it's still commendable because you're taking your time. We've all afforded the same 24 hours in a day, and you're going to the gym, you're prioritizing your health. So kudos to young people out there with no kids that are doing it. I don't want to make light of that. But when you're single, like, what in the hell else do you have to do with your time? When you're just a young single dude, like, I hope you can carve out 30 minutes a day, or like you have all the time in the world comparatively. So when I got older and I had one kid, and then eventually we had another kid, and when your career gets more demanding and things like that start taking your time, it becomes a lot more difficult to sustain that lifestyle. And I don't want to say it becomes more difficult to stay physically active, because I don't think it does. It becomes more difficult to do what most people think is required to be fit. And so the difference there is, I think the average person, like if I go out and somebody sees me, I have a good physique or whatever, people probably think, oh, that guy, I actually have people tell me, like, I'll go to Costco, oh man, you must live in the gym. And I'm like, actually, I spend 0 minutes inside a gym. I'm working out at my house with no equipment really. But even at that, no, like 30 minutes a day, a couple times a week can yield a phenomenal result if you make those 30 minutes count and you do the right things. And so having gone from the traditional bodybuilding bro for lack of a better, the traditional gym, whatever people would envision as the gym bro scene, going from being in more exposed to that culture, and then taking a step back and realizing that that's one way to do it, albeit not very efficient. And that's probably an important point, is you have what's optimal, right? And optimal often requires way more of a commitment than most people should or need to make or should make. And so what I mean by that is, if you set out and you say, I want to build as much muscle as possible, right? I want to be a bodybuilder. Then if you look at the data, if you look at the research, yeah, you're probably going to be in the gym like 4 or 5 hours a week at a minimum, right? Because you're going to have a certain total volume of resistance training. And to get optimal results, it's going to take a big commitment. But the thing that's important is the lion's share of the results happen in the beginning of that time commitment. So what I mean by that is, if research suggests that doing 20 sets per week per body part's optimal, so that means 20 sets for your chest, 20 sets for the biceps, 20 sets for the triceps, and you divide all that out over a week, the first set of every exercise is responsible for the largest percentage of the gains. So if you went to the gym and you just did one all-out set, for example, to failure, and then you walked out, so you did one set for chest, one set for back, one set,
That's
so
a Ben
on and so forth.
Bakikio, 15 minutes of fitness type.
Yeah, and what will happen is that there's actually, I'm working on some content that goes into showing with various studies exactly what percentage you get. The first set is responsible for about 61 to 65% of the total gains you're going to get out of that session. So you could go to the gym and, like you just mentioned, 15, 20 minutes and walk out and get 60% of the total possible gains. And then the thing there is the second set. So let's say instead of do we'll just use push-ups, for example. Instead of doing one set of push-ups, you do two. The second set is responsible for the next largest percentage of the gains. So if you go in and do two sets, maybe the first one is like 61 to 65%. The second set's 15%. So now you're already squeezing 75, 80% of the possible gains. If you stay in there for another set and another set, you can get a better overall result from a hypertrophy or muscle growth standpoint. But the opportunity cost, the investment that you're putting in with regards to time, is way, way, way higher.
Yeah, and then if you want it to be sustainable, it's hard to do that if you're in the gym 2 hours a day. Like, okay, now I got kids and I got a job and I got other stuff I got to do.
Right, and so what happens is you start sacrificing other things, and so you have to prioritize. It's like, number one, are you going to be paying your bills with bodybuilding? If you're not going to be a professional bodybuilder, you might want to prioritize your kids and your wife and other things, So it's like, how do you get? I think it's the 80-20 rule. How do you get the Pareto principle? How I want to get, and granted, if you're going to invest the time in exercise, you want to get good results. Like, you don't want to spin your wheels. So it's like, okay, how can I get an efficient training session that's going to give me good results? I don't care if it's optimal. I care if they're good and efficient. And so that's mostly what I focus my content on, is helping people get a good quality, high efficiency training session with minimal equipment so they can do it anywhere. And that's the people that I find that it's resonated the most with are people that are busy with, whether it's professional, that travel a lot. I just got off the phone with a guy with 4 kids, and he's like, man, being able to train at home is awesome. The kids are running around playing in the yard while I'm doing my workout. So, I think similar to the appeal of why P90X would appeal to somebody, the biggest difference is P90X is not much of strength training protocol. I mean, you're going to lose some body fat, burn a lot of calories. Even then, diet's more important for losing weight than exercise anyways. But so when I looked at what was available as far as body weight training, I thought, okay, how can I apply the basic principles of resistance training and hypertrophy and strength? So how do you build muscle and strength using only your body? And so that's kind of the angle that I try to provide, is more of a traditional strength and hypertrophy approach to body weight training. And one thing I would encourage people to, it's counterintuitive to an extent, and it's hard for people to grasp this, but if you need to lose weight, don't think of your exercise as your primary weight loss tool, because it doesn't work that way. And there's a lot of research coming out now where it's called the model of constrained energy expenditure. And it's basically, if you start out, for example, you go, okay, I'm going to work out twice a week with weights and I'm going to jog. Yeah, it's going to provide some weight loss. You're going to see weight loss, but the overall, maybe not from that exercise session. And this is what's important, is the 24-hour energy expenditure, so the total amount of calories you burn per 24-hour period at that same activity level, your body adapts and it goes down over time. So when you started out and you think, oh, my workout burned 300 calories, maybe it did. But per that 24-hour period, when you first started per day, yes, every day you work out, including all your other activity, there's an extra 300 calories on there. But a few months down the road, it's only 150, not 300. And so that, it's kind of like everything else in biology. More research is needed. Everything's not super clear, but it's becoming more and more clear that exercise is for improving your health, improving longevity, and the health benefits from exercise are huge, like huge. So when I tell people, hey, exercise does burn calories, but it burns less than most people think, and it's not the primary driver of fat loss. Some people think, awesome, I don't have to exercise now. Dude, I'm so glad I'm not even gonna exercise.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I know, JT, in the low carb community. When I first came out like a couple of years ago, everyone's like, exercise doesn't matter at all. Just cut your diet. I'm like, exercise matters. Yeah, and
it's maddening.
It's maddening, and it's like it's saying, hey, look, you could sit around and do nothing, and that was a big thing. And then that's why when Ben Bakikio came by, Bakikio, gosh, I always mess up his name. Benbow comes across, and you come across. I'm looking at like these guys are pretty dang fit, and they're doing some great stuff. And when you start realizing, look, it's not, you can't just change your diet, because what I find in my practice is the people who work out do better, right, with weight loss. Okay, like we're saying, we're agreeing. Okay, you're not going to lose weight just by exercise, because I exercise like crazy all the time, and I gained weight because my diet was so bad. And right. I thought it was healthy because I was doing the same thing 6 times a day, smoothies in the morning, and whole wheat toast and all that kind of stuff. What I thought was the right medical thing to do. But the point is, exercise helps with stress reduction, sleep. It helps with a ton of other factors that are interfering with weight loss too, and snacking and in these binge eating disorders and all those kind of things. And I see the emotional aspects, the mental clarity, and the really, when you start changing it, your body goes into a little panic mode. You start starving yourself, and you shut down your metabolism. Then you get into trouble too. And exercise definitely helps with these things also.
Yeah, it does. And the thing I try to help people realize is that in order to be optimally healthy, like I get bothered by the healthy at any size movement, because there are a percentage, and it's I actually posted recently on Twitter about this. I looked through the data, and it's about I think it was 5 to 7% of obese people are free of all the metabolic markers of the pre-diabetes, the 8 markers or whatever. So there's a small percentage that are classified as metabolically obese, right? They're healthy
and
obese.
I've seen it multiple times. Yeah, I just saw one yesterday, a lady, 290 pounds, 5'8", and 1.7 liters of visceral fat, normal insulin, normal A1C, normal lipids, right? Everything's great.
And the thing is, so I'm not going to tell people, hey, that doesn't exist. The problem is twofold, really. The problem is that you run into is now how many people that are truly metabolically healthy obese are not, but think they are, because they know it exists. So you've got people that are like, well, just because I'm big doesn't mean I'm not healthy. And I go, and it's like, yes, that you're right. It's possible to be big and to as far as biomarkers go, be healthy. But it's so few. I mean, if you think about 5 to 7%, it's like, okay, for every 5 people that are like that, there's 95 that aren't. So it's the vast minority. But then they did a follow-up. They looked at it after year by year, and after 10 years, what they found is you had like a 50% higher chance of no longer being. So basically, those biomarkers that at one point were healthy, as you age, are more likely to move into the unhealthy territory if you are metabolically healthy obese versus not.
Yeah, and it catches up with you also. And the other thing is, like in females in particular, I've been researching this recently, is that subcutaneous fat in the hip and butt that don't cause metabolic disease. As we get older, we lose the hormonal response, and then it starts going to visceral fat. Visceral fat's our enemy. And so guys like you, when you have muscle mass, guess what? You deplete your visceral fat. And the studies show the more muscle mass you have, the longer you live, right? But also the more muscle mass you have, the lower your insulin level. So I can argue from the insulin standpoint, you could argue from the muscle standpoint, but I think we agree in saying, hey, look, the more muscle mass you have, the less insulin you need to get rid of that extra carbohydrate or extra energy, whatever it may be.
Right. And that's why it took me a while, like, first growing a following on Twitter and YouTube and everything. Like I know what kind of I had my framework about what my ideas regarding diet and training and exercise and what have you, but to really see what the different arguments out there, and to see what positions people have, and to know kind of where to fit in. And that's where I've really latched on to the last probably year, is seeing a need to help educate the layperson, especially in a low carb community, not only in a low carb community, but especially in a low carb community, that exercise is vitally important for many reasons, regardless. And it does help with weight. It's frustrating too when people go like, oh, it doesn't help with weight loss at all. I'm like, no, it does. But what happens is when they take and I agree that the most important studies are not what's been shown in a lab, because you hear all the time, oh, low carb's no better than whatever else, because in a lab, when they control everything, and I'm like, granted, okay, but we don't live in a metabolic chamber, and we don't live in a lab, and nobody's preparing our food.
If we move into one, and we got some good studies on that, but
right,
as long as we live in the real world, it's a little bit more complicated.
Right. So it's like, what works best for like me and this guy over here when we're free living people, right? And so and there's multiple reasons why I think low carb works really well, not the least of which is you pretty much can't eat processed food. There's almost no processed food left for you to eat, right? Or highly processed food anyways. But the thing with exercise is, I don't care how carnivore you are or how keto you are, if you're not physically, now it doesn't mean you have to have structured exercise like, oh, I run 3 miles, then I lift or whatever. But if you are obese, your diet, I'm not obese, if you are sedentary, no diet will save you. There's so much data to back up. If you're obese, it's actually just below smoking for how bad it is for your health. So if you think, okay, I'm going to be keto, or I'm going to be carnivore, or whatever diet, vegan, any whatever it is you're going to be. So if you think, okay, I'm going to do this, you're going to see health improvements. You're going to see improvements in your biomarkers. And definitely, diet's foundational. So I'm not at all saying diet's not foundational, but having your diet be on point while you are sedentary is something that will catch up with you. And it may not seem like a big deal when you're 40 or 45 or even 50, but no matter how you eat, when sarcopenia sets in, and it will, no matter how you eat, I don't care how your diet is, there's tons of studies looking at protein intake, and protein will not save you from sarcopenia either if you're not physically active. It will help mitigate it, but it will not stop it. It will still get to you. And so, there's the sarcopenia issue where you have the age-related loss of muscle mass that no diet will save you from. And the problem with sarcopenia is, I've got kids, and one of my biggest fears is when my daughter has her kids, I can't take care of myself. She has to move me into her house, or I wouldn't want to burden her. So let me go into a home, and somebody else is having to wipe my butt and get me dressed. No, like that. I'm not going out like that. You know what I mean? So I think that you have to look at however you live today. If you say, I like my quality of life, I like to, go walk the dogs, plant in the garden, whatever it is, I like taking my own bath, like, without help. Even if you're fairly sedentary, if you can do it today at 40, that doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it at 75. And so if you want to be ambulatory and live on your own and take care of yourself for as long as humanly possible, hopefully forever, right, until you pass, then at least a set amount, something that provides some resistance and some physical activity to prevent age-related muscle wasting is really important. So there's the being able to take care of yourself, and being able to be a free living individual, I think, is hugely important. That should motivate you.
Yeah, to get up off the ground. Like some people just, they fall down, they fall down there, they can't get up.
Yeah, and so that's the one half, or the one part of it, is to be able to take care of yourself into old age, right? I mean, sure, you've seen people that are in their 80s and they can barely move. They're like walking a half mile an hour. And it's like, you don't, maybe they can't drive themselves anymore. Like,
I see people in their 50s like that.
Yeah.
40s.
So you want to do what you can as a preventive measure against that type of lifestyle. But at the same time, no matter how you eat, if you're sedentary and you start losing lower limb muscle mass, your balance isn't the best because you don't do anything to improve stability and balance. If you fall, no matter how you eat, you're way more likely to break a hip, have a catastrophic injury. And if you look at the data on hip fracture, something like 41% of people die within 12 months of a hip fracture. And so there's
dementia, it's higher than lung cancer death in that age group, and it's devastating.
Yeah, so there's the safeguarding yourself against injury, against falling, and then the helping yourself stay ambulatory and live on your own for as long as possible. But outside of all that, so I think sustaining your quality of life is really important as you age, right? We just don't think about that when we're 40, but eventually it hits you. But outside of that, and you alluded to it earlier, more research is showing that muscle acts as a longevity organ. It helps with insulin sensitivity. It's a glucose sink, helps dispose of additional blood sugars. Your mitochondria outside the heart, your skeletal muscle is the richest source of mitochondria in your body. And so the more mitochondria that you have, there's a lot of new research linking mitochondria to longevity. So I think recognizing that physical activity and building a strong functional body will pay dividends in these ways that people maybe don't always think about. And then outside of that, you got to look at exercises independently strongly correlated with reductions of not only all cause, but cause specific mortality, independent of diet, across almost everything you can think of, most cancers, heart disease, Alzheimer's. And that includes, so if you're keto and you've got let's say you're keto and there's some, it's obviously, it's not, I wouldn't want to say hypothetical, it's speculative. I would say it's speculative, but keto may offer some additional protection against neurodegenerative disorders, Alzheimer's, things like that. And so if people say, hey, look, I get that it's speculative, but I'm hedging my bets that keto is going to help me in these areas, that's totally cool. The only thing that you want to remember is, even if you're keto, even if you're whatever, if you also exercise, it's significantly better protection. So if you're eating a certain way outside of just weight loss, whatever protections you think your diet affords you, they're all amplified if you also are physically active.
Yeah, and that's an amen over here, man, because that's the important thing is being able to be active and fit, and it keeps you on track too. And I think, a lot of people say, well, I'm too tired to exercise. Well, you're too tired to exercise because you don't exercise. If you exercise, you won't be too tired to exercise. And it's amazing, but I see that all the time.
There's and I think what it is, one thing I would like to point out is with the Industrial Revolution, you had all these new technologies, steam engines, and then of course, over time now we've got from steam engines to like electricity, fossil fuel burning engines all over the place. We've basically gotten to a point where technology has displaced our having to be physical to survive, right? Up until fairly recently, people were washing clothes by hands, at least getting up to change the channel on the TV, getting up to answer the phone. The little daily activities that kept our bodies in a stronger state have been removed from modern life. And so if you talk about like your grandfather, my grandfather, they would laugh if, oh, I'm going to go to the gym and exercise. They're like, what the hell are you exercising for? Like, they didn't need to exercise because life required them to be physical to live. But since that's been removed from modern life, and so that's,
so you don't even have to walk to the car now to get your dinner. You just order and they deliver to your door.
Uber Eats.
You have all this stuff everywhere. I'm telling you, it's like no one walks. Like, oh, I'll just Uber it. I'm not walking.
Right. So that's the thing that I like to let people know is, it's not that anybody's lazier than any other generation or anybody before them. You're just a human living in the modern environment. And the reason we have, the primary reason, and it's multifactorial for sure, but the reason we have an obesity epidemic is because our entire environment in the last 40, 50 years has radically changed to where there's almost no physical activity unless you force it into your daily life. And then on top of that, and that's not necessarily so much the fat loss perspective, that's coming from the proliferation of ultra processed food literally everywhere. Like it's everywhere. And so I think you have to step back and say, hey, look, I'm not a lazy person. Life's just different today than it was 50 years ago. And since life's different today, what's the minimum that I need to do to stay healthy and make sure that I'm living kind of the way people did 50 years ago? I hate exercise. I don't want to do it, but I also want to live long and be healthy. And so I think that's what people need to do is it's totally okay to say, hey, I hate exercise. I don't want to do it. I'm tired. Because that's just our species was designed to conserve energy. We didn't historically get out of the cave and go run a marathon, right? I mean, what the hell? Like, no, you just lived.
Yeah, lions don't jog around to kill something. They sprint and kill the thing, and then they eat, and then they lay in the sun, right? They go in the tree and chill.
Yeah,
right?
Animals just do what nature selected for them to do. But our modern lifestyle, it doesn't matter what nature selected for anymore, because we've got the technology to now we've altered all of that. So that's where I think it's important to let people know, hey, if you hate exercise or you're like, I'm tired, I don't want to do it, that's totally fine. Like to your point, Brian, nobody wants to do it until they start doing it. And then what happens
when you're done too, you go, oh man, I'm glad I've never had anyone at work out go, I wish I didn't do that.
Right.
right?
And it's multifactorial there also, because what happens is you have endorphins, you have different chemicals inside the brain that get released in response to exercise that help you feel better. But at the same time, like you mentioned, it helps improve your sleep quality, it helps relieve stress. You're not going to get that stuff from one session, but if you can string together enough, physical activity on a week-to-week basis, you start noticing, man, I am sleeping better. I feel more refreshed in the mornings. All those improvements that there's what they call like a training effect, or the downstream effects of exercise as your body improves, as you have these cellular adaptations happen at the smallest biological levels. Your body's getting healthier, and then you start feeling better. You start feeling higher energy. You start feeling younger. But the hardest part for most people is being consistent long enough to experience all that stuff. Because like I talked about earlier, we're creatures of habit. I got lucky. I went into the Marine Corps, and they made me exercise, so it stuck with me. But I understand the hard part for a lot of people is they don't have the habit of exercise, and they never can quite get that habit to stick.
Yeah, and I love what you're doing too, because you go, look, if you've never worked out before, like people are gonna look at you and go, I can't do what this guy does. But you go, hey, look, do push-ups on the back of a couch to start, then do it on the cushions, then move down a little bit, do what you can do. You don't have to be, the star at the first workout, and slowly stepping into what you can do. If you just have to stand against the wall and bend your knees a little bit, start with that. Like start somewhere.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The journey of 1,000 miles begins at one step type. Just take the first step, and then take the second step, and take it one day at a time. And the reality is that we all get exposed to unrealistic expectations because of unscrupulous marketing. And so you've got the 90 days to shred and all that type of fitness industry stuff. What it really is they manipulate the lighting, they do Photoshop, they airbrush people. A lot of those transformations are planned out months in advance, and it's all a lot of like trickery. And so the biggest things that's why it's important to think, okay, why am I exercising? I think most people, yeah, I would like to lose fat, I would like to look better. Those are fine. There's no wrong motivation. It's totally okay to say, hey, I don't like the way I look, I want to look better, and that's totally fine. But that will take time. You're not going to start exercising and look better in a week. But if you look at your kids and you think, hey, I'm going to probably live longer, I'm going to reduce my chances of getting these various diseases, I'm going to be a healthier individual. If you realize every session you put in that you're bettering yourself, that you're getting stronger, that you're getting healthier, even if you already eat well, even if you're already fairly healthy, I think that's helps people stay motivated or stay committed. But I think you have to actually understand that and believe it. If you're one of these people that thinks like, oh, there's no reason to exercise because since it's not the primary driver of weight loss, it's just if you like it, do it. If you don't like it, don't do it. If that's your attitude, you'll never stick with it because you don't see a reason to stick with it. You got to have a reason why you want to stick with it. And then once you've identified a reason, like, hey, I'm convinced it's going to help me live longer, I'm going to do this, then what I encourage people is to take 30 days and make it a point to be physically active every single day, no days off for 30 days. And what I'm not saying is, I'm not saying do some hard workout every day. I'm saying go for a 10-minute walk around the block. Or maybe one day you do some push-ups, some body weight squats or whatever. The next day you go on a walk. The next day you're stretching. It can be light physical activity, but put on some exercise clothes and log 5 to 10 minutes. Because what happens is once any activity becomes a part of your daily schedule and your daily life, you will find it's very easy to stick with it. But the problem is you have to do it long enough. And when you brought up Ben and there's some other people, it's true. If you train twice a week and you do a very efficient 15 to 20 minute exercise session twice a week, you can build muscle mass, you can maintain muscle mass, you can significantly increase your strength. It doesn't require big commitment. The thing that I found that's hard for some people is if you look at the research on exercise for longevity, 20 minutes twice a week is inadequate. If you're talking about wanting to really, you should be physically active every day. And
yeah. And they make that point and say, hey, look, twice a week, this is your exercise. The other stuff's your activity. Go for walks, go for hikes, play tennis, go play golf, move around.
Exactly. You still need to do activity. So
yeah, you can't sit around 5 days a week. Yeah, for sure.
There's a recent study they looked at as a meta-analysis I just read. I'm actually going to post it probably tomorrow. But they looked at people that exercised for 30 minutes a day, but And what they found is when they pulled all the data, people who exercised for 30 minutes a day but were otherwise very sedentary saw no reductions in all-cause mortality. And so the problem is you cannot just, and now when I say sedentary, they're talking 11 plus hours of sitting. So they're talking a lot of sitting. And so but then what they found is when they looked at various patterns, people who exercised 30 minutes a day and were lightly active, every hour for like 5 minutes, all of a sudden 30% reduction in all-cause mortality.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, that's incredible.
Yes. So it's important if you're like an office worker, hey, set a timer every hour, hour and a half, get up, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, stretch for a minute, sit 5 minutes, then sit back down. It's that humans were not meant, if you look at hunter-gatherer societies, they're more active than we are for sure. But the biggest thing is they don't sit in chairs. They do basically active squats. They do like a toddler squat, and they actually squat down and they talk, or they're active in their rest positions where we sit in high back chairs, lay on couches. And so I think the two things that are important is it's like, number one, either do some kind of structured exercise program. Outside the structured exercise program, still be lightly active throughout your day. Whatever that, a walk in the morning.
That's great advice, man.
Yeah. And that can be as simple as when you go to the grocery store, park far away. Number one, no one will hit your car with shopping carts or ding your doors, which is awesome. And just walk further into the store, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just being cognizant of.
I'd laugh, man. I'm at the gym and I see people like circling the parking lot trying to find a close spot. It's like, dude, just park out there. You're going to go exercise now. You might as well walk a little bit more. So it's funny because everyone gets the close spots at the gym even, right? Because it's our habit. That's what we do.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes people drive around for 5 minutes. It's like, man, you could have already parked and been inside.
You could have got a little extra 5-minute warm up on your way in, right? So it's kind of crazy. Hey, JT, I'm not going to let you escape without telling your story, man. Because I want people,
go ahead.
I want people to know who you are, man.
Yeah, go for it, dude.
No, that's what I'm asking, man. I want to hear about you, how you grew up, and I know you had some hard times, and I really want people to say, that you haven't had an easy time, but you haven't been this fit muscle guy. We've already made that clear. But I want to hear about, when you were a kid, what you went through and what brought you to where you are now. Because you're a decent, cool guy, and I always you make me laugh on Twitter, and I love your approach, and like you're just cool the way you handle life. So, how'd you get that point, and how'd you get to where you are now from there?
So when I was, my grandparents are old school Portuguese. They're like basically farm workers, right? My grandmother and grandfather started out. My grandfather milked cows by hand way back. I mean, my grandmother passed away in 2014 at 98 years old. So I mean, we're talking 1920s, 30s, So they got together. My grandfather milked cows by hand. My grandmother helped him milk cows by hand. They saved money, and eventually, once my grandmother had their first kid, my grandfather didn't want her to work anymore. And so she stayed home, and he got a loan and bought this super rickety, falling apart little dairy. But it was theirs, that was like their first dairy. And so they worked over the years, had more kids. The kids grew up. My dad grew up working for my grandparents on the dairy. And so it was kind of like the American dream. The immigrants come, start a business, And so my grandparents were successful. My dad, growing up working for his dad, was always successful. And when my dad was like 35 years old, I was just born, so I was a baby at this time. My grandfather finally decided to put my dad into business. Like they were going to get him his own dairy. And so it was a time at that point that was right. So they already acquired the land and leased the dairy out. My dad went into business, and it was a really difficult time in the dairy business. So he went at a bad time and wasn't successful. And my dad had an older brother who was a Hell's Angel and into running drugs, and like it was all bad. And but he was my dad's older brother, and so he came around. And during a time when my dad was struggling with business financially and losing money, and not sure if he's going to be able to make it. He had never been unsuccessful. And I think the way that he dealt with it was, hanging out with my uncle. They started doing drugs, got my dad into cocaine. And so my dad started to develop a pretty bad drug problem. I was, at that point, 4 or 5 years old. He ended up losing the dairy. And so I only remember small amounts because of how young I was. But to give you an example of how bad it got, I can remember we had cornfields next door where they grow corn as part of, feed for the dairy cows. So I can remember my dad chasing my mom and me with a handgun through the cornfields, flipping out. He's like having a psychotic break or whatever from, a very expensive cocaine habit, thinking my mom is like cheating on him, and so he's chasing us through a corn.
Yeah, paranoid.
Yeah, well, like
agitated.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so finally my mom left and moved in with her mom, and then my dad ended up losing the dairy, and he cleaned up. He basically cleaned up and came back, and then my mom's mom passed away, and so this tells you how bad things got again. So he's cleaned up for a little while. Then we moved to Southern California from where he lived at that point, near Bakersfield, California. We moved to Southern California, and my dad was going to start working in construction, but I had 4 brothers, so it was me and three. One of them was already old enough; he was gone. But 3 brothers and me, my mom and my dad, all living at a campgrounds, right? So I was at that point in 3rd grade, and so we had a camper, like an old Ford, 70s Ford 1-ton pickup with a camper bed, and so you had like three boys, my mom and dad, living in this camper, and then tents. At the time, I didn't think much about it because I was in 3rd grade. So like, oh, cool, I'm at a campground. Where I felt bad then was my older brother Kenny I was 3rd grade, so he would have been like maybe a senior in high school. So here you have my older brother in high school living in a campgrounds, which is super embarrassing, right? Like that.
Yeah,
so,
he knew. Yeah, he knew, and you're like, oh, we're camping, cool.
Yeah, so that part of it, like living at the campgrounds, wasn't the end of the world for me. And I think part of what kept me from not turning out well, I mean, I had my little issues and stuff, but I think part of what kept me from not turning out well is my brother Kenny's my next oldest one. He's 10 years older than me. But he being a little older and knowing how bad it sucked for him going through high school living like this, like he felt extra bad for me. And so he always kind of went out of his way to watch out for me and helped be kind of a father figure there, so as far as my dad at the time, he was like, he always worked hard. That's one thing, because I think growing up being a farm worker, dairy worker, like my dad always worked hard. Even he never quite kicked the drug problem. He wasn't loose. It wasn't to the extent it was when I was younger, where he was like flipping out and it was like really bad. But he was, some people call it like a functioning tweaker or whatever. The problem was my dad would struggle with this issue where it made him kind of distant. He was around but not around, you know what I mean? He was gone all the time, lose track of time. And so it was one of those things where like I didn't have a dad that was asking how my homework was I doing my work? Like he wasn't concerned with what I was doing. But I always like to be clear, my dad was never physically abusive. It wasn't like that. He's always a very nice person. It was just he got strung out on drugs and never quite was the same after that. And so so when we moved down south, it was from there through 7th grade, things were like, they'd be good for a bit, then bad, then good, then bad. We got evicted from I think we lived in 9 houses in a fairly short period. I mean, I was 7th grade, so 3rd, 4th, so almost every year we're getting evicted from somewhere. I can remember coming home from school, maybe 4th grade, 5th grade, and going to turn on the lights and there's no electricity, and going to get food and there's almost nothing to eat. There's potatoes and ketchup, that's the whole meal, And I can remember me and my older brother Kenny shared a room, and he's at this point he's senior in high school, 1st year of college, and he's doing homework by candlelight, falling asleep with his face in a book. So I think his example of seeing him persevere through that and then go to college and get an engineering degree. He's a robotics engineer today.
Wow.
So I think seeing his example, he had it hard just because of his age. I can't even imagine having been in high school and that's how your parents live and that's how you have to live, and it would be embarrassing.
Bringing friends home and with things like that, it's embarrassing.
Oh, dude, no friend. Yeah, no friends.
Like my friend Greg, he gave his testimony here, in one of the first episodes. And the same story. His dad was on drugs. Nice guy, but the drugs just took control of his life, and he wasn't there for him. I'll be there for your birthday, and wouldn't show up. And it's a lot like your story too. The same.
Yeah, thing. And that's what I try to tell people is on the one hand, my dad is the type of person that will give you the shirt off his back. He was, and to his to his detriment, he was such a overly nice guy to people would take advantage of him. They would prey on him and take advantage of him. And so he would be doing stuff for his friends before his kids sometimes, and again, the drugs just screw you up like that. But, and at this point, my mom, in trying to cope with my dad's drug problem, my mom became an alcoholic. So I had a mom who was an alcoholic. So she was a hairdresser. So she would work from morning till night to try to, because my dad was always like, started his construction company, but never really making money. So my mom's like picking up the slack.
My mom was a hairdresser also, so I know they work hard and they're psychologists and they do all that crazy stuff.
Right. So she'd be working until late at night. Yeah. So I would come home from school and she wouldn't go home till like 8 o'clock at night. And so I'm letting myself in and I'm basically raising myself, and I can't explain 100% why I didn't get into worse things. I just, maybe God looked out for me or whatever. I don't know, but I just didn't. And, but my grandmother, when I was, she, like I mentioned, was a successful dairyman, her and my grandfather passed away at this point, but every summer, every Christmas vacation, I was gone. As soon as it was summer, I went to stay with grandma. Like I couldn't wait, And so one year she was going to come get me. And then so we met up, I went home with her and I was just telling her like how things were. And so she was like, well, you're just going to stay with me from now on. You're getting, it's 8th grade. She's I didn't know things. She never wanted to believe that her kid was, she was kind of like wool over the eyes a little bit. And, but then at that point she told me, yeah, you're going to stay with me. And so she just told my mom and dad like, hey, this is what's going to happen. And wow. That luckily that got my parents to move back to close to Bakersfield. And, my dad got mostly cleaned up at that point, but I say mostly because it was still on and off, right? It'd be good for a while, then not. And but at this point, it didn't affect me as much because I lived with my grandmother. And my mom and dad were down the street, but it was just like at that point, the stability and my grandmother always being there for me. I looked at her more as my mom, than my mom and dad. And then as I got older and I'm going through high school, that's when I started to kind of get some resentment toward my parents, just because, most of my other friends had like quote unquote normal parents who actually were more involved and cared what the hell was going on. And my parents weren't like that, So that's partly why, when I turned 18, I joined the Marine Corps. I was like, gonna go take care of myself, not rely on anybody. So I left into the military, and it wasn't until about 10 years ago, I didn't talk to my parents that much after that. Once I went into the military, I realized as I grew up, I thought, okay, I'm on my own. I can't change my past. I can't help who my parents are. Yeah, it does hurt when you're, at the end of the day, I have kids. I'm never going to choose drugs over my kids. Like I'm just not. They're more important to me than whatever else, right?
Yeah, you broke the cycle. I could see that in you. I could see that, on
dude,
Twitter, what you're posting about family and loving your wife and kids, and that's breaking the cycle. And that's a huge important thing. Not saying, okay, my dad was a drunk and did all this stuff, that so I'm going to do the same stuff,
And everybody, like I've made mistakes when I was in my 20s and stuff. I did some knucklehead, but it's like normal knucklehead kid stuff, And at a certain point, it's like, I don't know. I think maybe seeing how my parents were with me, then when I had my own kids, I was like, I am going to give my kids what I didn't have. There's just no other option. But the cool, so for a long time, I didn't really talk to my parents much, but I also know that if you harbor bitterness toward somebody, it only hurts you. It only prevents you from being able to, be everything that you can be. So I kind of
is you drinking the poison waiting for the other person to die.
Yeah. So I just thought, screw it. It is what it is. I can't help it. Do I wish I had different parents? Yes, 100%, but I can't go back and get different parents. So why am I going to worry about that? But I looked at my grandmother more like my mother. So for sure, that was like, she was the rock that I think gave me stability, especially through 8th grade and high school, where it's like, there's more peer pressure. You care more what people think about you. Having stability and not like, not living in a disgusting house with no food and no electricity. And like, especially nowadays, I'm pretty sure CPS would have just taken us from my parents, but this is long ago enough that that didn't happen. But my mom actually miraculously completely stopped drinking like 10 years ago, and then she passed last year, but she stopped drinking like 10 years ago. They moved back to Pennsylvania, where I have two of my older brothers. So my dad moved back there and completely cleaned up also. So now, for the last 10 years, like I said, my mom passed. So I'm really grateful that she cleaned up. She kicked her alcohol problem. We kind of reconnected more. And so on the one hand, had we never done that and she would have passed away, I don't know that I would have really been that negatively impacted, just because I kind of, you can't go back and get your past back, if that makes sense. Like, I'm never going to be as close to my dad as probably your kids are to you or my kids are to me, because I'm there for my kids when they need me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But with that being said, once my parents cleaned up, and my dad, when my mom passed, it made a big impact on him too, because I think his problem is he always felt like he was going to live. You don't realize mortality's, you don't think about it. You think you're going to live forever, right? But it's gotten to a point now. So my dad we went back to my mom's funeral, and my dad's like not crying over the loss of my mom. I mean, he is, but he could barely talk to me without tearing up and just like hugging me and crying. And like, same thing, talking to my brothers. You could see the regret. Like you could see him, or he'll call me on the phone and he has to stop talking and like hold the phone away while he cries throughout the conversation. So the thing is, because I know my dad was fundamentally a good person and he just made poor decisions, and yes, it's never going to not hurt that he put his kids behind drugs and his friends and whatever else. But it's like, I kind of realize, hey, the dude really is sorry. And I 100% believe that if he could go back and change it, he would, but he can't. So am I going to be an asshole to my dad and then he's going to die one day? And what did that accomplish for me? Like, if I don't forgive him and I don't make the best of what time we've got left, what does that profit me? But then on top of that, how is that me honoring my father, even whether he deserves it or not? For the past, yeah, he doesn't.
That's grace and forgiveness, man. Two huge, massive things, right? It's hard. It's easier said than done to forgive and say, look, can't change the past, move on.
Right. So it's like, and some stuff, dude, I'll give you probably one of the worst examples. When I was in 3rd grade, we had a science fair, and I was always super interested in science, right? So I wanted to go to the science fair. My mom's like, look, I have to work. I have late clients. I'm probably going to work till 9 or 10 o'clock. She's telling my dad, you have to pick them up. It's over at 9 o'clock. You got to pick them up. So my dad drops me off at the science fair. Of course, he never comes back for me. So the science fair is over and the janitors are cleaning the school. I ended up staying with the janitors until 1 a.m. And then my dad showed up at 1 a.m. when he remembered that he was supposed to get me. So it's like, it's that kind of stuff, being an afterthought to your parents where they don't even remember that.
Yeah,
where's my
that
kid
sends
at?
a message, man. And now, not only that, it's that they're present but not present too. They're on Twitter, they're on texting, and I've been guilty of that. It's like, oh, I'm gonna respond to JT, right? And so there's a lot of that where we're absent even though we're there, and there's a lot of families that they don't connect even though they have the time together because they're watching TV and not tuning each other out. And that's one thing we're seeing in society also.
Yeah, and you're right. It's almost, and especially social media and electronic stimulation, it triggers dopamine. It's like a drug in a way. And so you've got to be cognizant not to let that eat into. You got to try to balance it, which dude, it's hard. But yeah, I think that's the thing for me that was important, is realizing that I would rather things have been different. I can't go back and change them. And so whatever time I do have left with my dad, I would still forgive him even if he wasn't sorry. And I know there's a lot of people in that position where they're like, he still doesn't give a damn. Luckily, and I think it's comforting for me to know. I know he feels bad because I can see it in his face and when we talk and stuff like that. And like recently, I mean, he sends my kids money for their birthday, for Christmas. He buys them. Like he's different now. And so it didn't come till I was 35 years old that, I was 33, I think. So it took a long time. But I think that if someone's listening to this and you've had a bad relationship or people have hurt you in the past, if they're not blood related, screw them. Like, like you don't have to be attached to anybody long term. Move on. But if it's your parents or if it's a brother or a sister or something you've had issues with, yeah, maybe they're never going to change. You still got to forgive and move on. So for you, not for them, but for you. But I never thought my mom would ever. I thought she would just drink herself to death, and she didn't. I figured my dad would be the same forever, and I didn't have much hope. And he wasn't. He actually straightened out. So I think that people might surprise you, and you never know. If that's going to happen. So you can always hold out hope for that. But whether or not they change, I do think it's important to forgive and forget, let it go. Because ultimately, like, I have one older brother. The rest of us are pretty much all let it go. But I have one older brother who he still struggles with that resentment and certain things like, oh, I should have went to college if I had better parents. Like he still, and it eats him up, dude. Like it bothers him still. And he's like,
my parents were divorced when I was at a young age, and one of my brothers holds them responsible for a lot, and the other say, well, what are you going to do? It happens, and now everyone's divorce is a lot different. But and I made a decision too. I was like, I'm going to make sure that I dated my wife for 8 years, even though I know she was awesome, because I want to make sure I don't want my kids to go through that. I owe that to them. And so we have responsibilities, and we learn and life lessons and all those things. And that's what this podcast is about. Like what you're talking about, coming from where you came from, to be a kind, decent guy who loves your wife and kids, and you're a family guy, and helping people. Like, what else can you do, man? You're helping people to live longer and be healthier, and that we're kindred that way. And we may have different approaches sometimes, with other people. But it's like, hey, everyone's trying to do their best at some point. Your dad did the best he could, and he didn't know, and he was, drugs and all these things can lead us down the wrong path. And so for us, it's a lesson. We have to learn from that and say, okay, I can't hate you. And we'll try to figure out how to, and that, like you telling the story of him being repentant, feeling sad, he can't even hold the phone up, because for a guy to cry to his kids is very tough, right? And so, macho guys and so showing emotions and those things.
Oh yeah, and he never did in the past, but like you said, now it's he can't even hold it in. And the thing is, if I wouldn't have forgiven him, well, I'll give you an example. Recently, he lives in Pennsylvania. He came to to the West Coast to see some old friends from like high school. My dad's 76, and he's not actually, for as bad as he lived, his health isn't bad for as bad as he lived. I mean, he did not take care of himself,
Yeah.
But he's got, they have him on a PCSK9 inhibitor now for high cholesterol and some different stuff. And he had a bypass. So like it caught up with him eventually. But at 76, I don't know how much longer he's going to be around. Maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's, I have no idea. But he drove out, and so he calls me and he goes, I knew when he was on the West Coast at some point he was going to come by, but I figured it would be like, hey, let's meet up this, So he calls me and he goes, hey, I'm 2 hours from your house. I was like, oh, gee, thanks for letting me know,
Yeah.
So like just out of nowhere, I was expecting him like to, hey, I'll be there tomorrow, the next day, whatever. So anyways, he came down. And my grandmother passed away, who was very instrumental in help. Yeah. And so she passed away 5 years ago. And so when I was 16, she had this 91 Cadillac, the last big mafia staff wagon, like they're called the Cadillac Brome. It's like the rappers restore them now and drive them,
Oh yeah.
The big ones, like Joe Pesci and all that. So.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, so she had one, and she had bought a new Cadillac after that one, but that was her car that everybody knew her as. Like that was what she was associated with. And so when she passed away, I knew nobody else had any kind of sentimental attachment to that car, and it wasn't worth a lot of money or anything, but I that's the car I got my driver's license in. I grew up with that car, that was grandma's car. So I told the attorneys for her estate, and I told my my cousin that was executor, I said, hey, if no one, like, I'll take care of that car. So if like I would like to keep it, because I'll never sell it. Like it'll stay with me until I die. And she goes, yeah, that's fine if you want it. So the only thing is it needed some work. It hadn't been started in like 5 years. But this is my dad's mom, my grandmother. So anyways, my dad came over and he goes, hey, you ready to get the Cadillac running? And so I said, yeah, let's do it. So I just kind of didn't reply to anybody, and took like 4 days. My dad stayed for like 4 days, and we put like changed all the belts, hoses, spark plugs, drained all the fluids, put all new fluids. We went through the car and got it running. And then now my dad took off to go visit one of my other brothers. And then, but I could have done it myself.
Spending the time. Yeah. Spending the time though, just talking about life and, getting your hands dirty. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. And so, it's, I guess one of those things where it's kind of like, you a little bit of forgiveness and then a little bit of repentance. And, like I'd rather have, I know he's not gonna be around forever. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, when he does pass away, I'm not gonna have any regrets.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna worry about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we don't live forever. So if somebody's listening and they've had somebody wrong them in the past, maybe start a conversation or and you can't help it if they're not repentant. I mean, it is what it is,
Well,
I mean,
JT, I'll tell you, the best medicine right now for your dad is your forgiveness and saying, "Hey, Dad, love you. Let me put my arm around you. Let's do this thing together." For him to say, at least I'm making some amends for screwing up my entire life and making bad choices and all that, just to have the ability, because some of us never get that chance. One of us drops dead and you never have the opportunity to say, "Gosh darn it, let's go talk about life for half an hour, 2 hours, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and that's like like I told you, I have one brother that still holds some resentment, but my brother Kenny, the one that was the next older one after me, my dad's at his house now. But so Tuesday we're gonna meet up on Balboa Island and go deep sea fishing, the three of us. So like little stuff like that. I think and because the way my dad was when I was growing up, if something happened and we didn't like, if I didn't have these experiences with him, I'll be okay. If my grandmother was harder for me when she passed, it was harder
no,
for
I
me.
get it.
But I feel like, right, but I know my dad feels bad, and I know the thing is, he's gotten to the age, and with the bypass surgery and everything else, he all of a sudden realizes that his time is limited. And so I think that hit him, and I can tell he I can tell it matters. So it's like, I feel like, okay, I even told my dad, I'm like, man, after we spent 4 days on the car and I have work to get caught up on, I'm like, we don't have to go deep sea fishing. And I could tell he wanted to go. He's like, I could tell it was important to him. So I was like, okay, it's fine. Let me do a few days of work and then we'll meet and we'll go on Tuesday. So I'm more doing this. I mean, I'll enjoy it. I'm gonna hopefully catch a bunch of fish, come home and grill, and
Yeah, man,
but,
I might drive up.
Yeah, dude, I'm totally stoked to go deep sea fishing. Don't get me wrong, but it's the importance of this trip. I could not go and I'd be fine, but I could tell it means a lot to my dad.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I feel like, on the one hand, yeah, maybe it's partially healing for me also, but it's like an old man that's not going to be alive forever. I could tell it's going to mean a lot to him, so I'm going to go do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's good. This is life's best medicine right here, man. That is bringing healing, and you being transparent, telling your story, because it's hard to do that, to be vulnerable and talk about this kind of stuff. And I really appreciate you doing that, because I think you're going to help a lot of people out there. You're helping a lot of people physically, but I think this emotional healing, because I talk about the love of the Father, and it's hard to know. Like, for me, it's God, right? And I can forgive my dad for dumb stuff he did I have a great dad, by the way, but going through the divorce and him, like you said, working on the business, I was left home alone a lot, and there wasn't a lot of interaction. He didn't go to my football games and wrestling matches and all that stuff. And I had an older brother, like you did, 10 years older, who supported me in everything. Right. So like, we're very close, but you can't have those times back. You can't have the times of, hey, when you won the championship game and, your brother's there cheering for you and videotaping, those things, it makes a difference. Your grandma being there for you, once if she wasn't there, you look at life and go, man, you get led on a path to learn and to experience. And, your dad has to sit back and look at you and go, man, look what he's doing with his kids. I should have done that. Like, he sees that. He must be so proud of you and say he got it, even though I wasn't a good example.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I guess, quotes or what, one of the things that a famous person said, when Teddy Roosevelt said, do what you can with what you have where you are. Like, that's all any of us can really do. I get my one of my older brothers that he still holds a resentment. He was a smart guy. He was like ranked number 1 or 2 in California for wrestling. He ended up getting in trouble for drugs, which my dad got him into. Like, I totally get it, man. My dad screwed him. But the whole point is, the past is over. Like, living in the past, dwelling on the past, is going to do absolutely nothing for your future. It's going to do nothing for you today. And so, instead of being angry, it's like, instead of being angry at, I'll give you an example when it comes to food. Instead of being mad at the government for not fixing the obesity problem, or like, look, we can all want certain things, but they're not going to happen tomorrow. So the only way you can make your life better is for you to make your life better. No one can do it for you, right? You have to do it.
And to influence the people that you can, and that want to listen, that want to be helped, and that want to step up. Like,
I think that there are people out there that want to help people, as long as you want to help yourself. But I think that you have to make that determination and realize that, like, I mean, my parents were super. I mean, we grew up in, dude, it was very, very high very like extreme poverty, I guess, depending on how you define extreme, but no electricity and no food. I would consider that extreme poverty. So, but my point is, like, that's fine. But it's the past. So today, what can I do? So I know there's a lot of people out there. Maybe you grew up in, there's a lot of African American community, Hispanic community, people have parents that struggle. They work 3 jobs. They weren't around. Certain socioeconomic issues can affect any race, but they're more prevalent in certain races. And hopefully over time, those things get taken care of. Unfortunately, those things getting taken care of in 10 years isn't helping anybody today. So life's not fair. And I think that's what I realized is just growing up, life's not fair. So you've got to do the best you can with the deck that you've got. That's all you can do. But the thing is, if you try to play the hand the best you can repeatedly, you're going to succeed eventually. And so I think the more that you use society's ills or whatever as an excuse, and some of them are valid, dude, it's harder for you. A kid born in a good neighborhood with good parents that care has a way easier time than someone who is in a different situation, but they can both still succeed. It's just going to be harder for this person over here.
And you're an example of that. You stepped up and you made life changes, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because of this. Obviously you're a great guy and you do great stuff, but the point is, like, look, you weren't born with this silver spoon in your mouth, and you don't resent people. They had a different.
No, I would do it. I wish I was one of them. Shit.
Yeah, I know exactly, right. But you don't begrudge them that. You go, okay, look, I had a hard time.
No, you can't help your parents, man. Kudos. You said you had a great dad. I wish everybody had a great dad. And
yeah.
And parents that were financially secure and stuff. Like, no, I'm not. I think
that made you who you are now. That made you to understand, because you have a different. I think a lot of kids now don't have the perception of what it's like. I spend time in the third world a lot, and I come back and think, wow, man, we got it good. Like, you don't know, like, when you hate your country, you go somewhere else for a couple of days and see what happens. Like, you just get thrown in jail, they beat you, there's places where they're just crazy, right? Yeah, and you just don't realize, like, how good you have. And sometimes you have to go through like what you went through, because I'm looking behind you at your beautiful house. I'm thinking, man, you got electricity, you got running water, and you go, you know what I mean? Like, to you, that means something, because you haven't had it your entire life. And you say,
dude, after being in the Marine Corps, I can tell you, like, I gained an appreciation for, like, dude, it's 108 outside right now. I'm inside with the AC blasting, and I'm like, things are good. I don't really stress over a lot of stuff that people maybe stress over, that, because I realized that what's really important.
Yeah.
But it was a process, for sure, to go through that. So,
yeah, man.
But that's the biggest takeaway, I think, that I like to try to exercise, diet, whatever. No matter what position you're in, no matter how overweight you are, no matter how unhealthy you are, no matter how poor you are, no matter how hard whatever you've got going on. Dude, I sympathize. It's unfortunate. If you're really in a bad position, your husband's cheating on you, your wife's cheating on you. Like, yeah, dude, we go through terrible things in life. All of us will go through terrible things in life. But the only person who can make a change, the only person that can play your hand is you. No matter how bad things are, you can try to make the best decisions you can every day. And sometimes you're going to fail. We all fail. But if you try to do the best you can every day with what you've got in front of you, not what you wish you had, because you can wish you had whatever, and that doesn't matter because you don't have it. So I think that's the biggest thing that I try. It's just like working out. I don't have a gym, dude. You don't need one. I can't afford grass-fed steaks. You don't need them. Like, you don't need that crap.
Yeah, appreciate what you got and do it the best with what you got, man. That's
right. That's dude. Yeah.
Right.
That's pretty much it, man.
I kept you late, man. I totally appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, it's fine, man.
This is life's best medicine. This is important stuff. There's like super important stuff here. We went long, but every second matters. And JT, how do people find you, man? If they want to find you and track you down and follow you, because your story is awesome, and what you're doing, I really respect you a lot, really, and for coming out and talking about this stuff, because, I think your pain is going to help other people that can identify and understand. But, if people want to track you down, how do they get you to, I know you're doing a lot on YouTube, but
actually, Twitter, it'll just be my name, Jerry Teixeira, or in Portuguese, just Teixeira. And so it's just Jerry and then Teixeira. And the YouTube's the same thing, same name. And then I have a website, bodyweightstrength.fit. That's just like a free resource where it helps organize the videos and helps you get started with exercise if you're interested in that.
Yeah, you're doing awesome stuff. So, I'm recommending you to my patients, and I watch you and I'm like, are there wires attached? How the heck is he doing that? You're doing some awesome stuff, man. So, hey, thank you so much. Hey, everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And JT, do you have any big life wisdom you want to leave us with on your way out, man?
I think the biggest thing, and I made some mistakes in my 20s, and I learned, which I think not having a father figure that really hammered home integrity, right, and doing the right thing. The biggest thing I would want to leave people with is, especially if you're a young guy listening to this at all, um, try to do the right thing in any situation, even when it's hard. You know, put others before yourself. And I found that by putting other people first, generally they will go out of their way for you, and opportunities will, doors will open for you. So that's pretty much it, man. Try to put others before yourself, and if you do that consistently, you usually, and have integrity. Don't go along with the crowd or do things that in your heart you shouldn't do, just because I didn't have that father figure there. And so in my early 20s, I worked in some places where I got in some compromising situations that really screwed me. And it was because I was trying to please my boss, who was a male, right? Like, it was like that. Looking back, I realized, I'm like, dude, I should have bounced out of that place way sooner.
Yeah.
So I would just say, listen. But I knew in all the situations where I got myself into trouble when I was younger, I knew better, and I just couldn't figure out why I didn't walk away sooner, why I stayed as long as I did. And it really is because of what was missing with my dad. And so I definitely think that, would listen to your heart of hearts, and when something's not right, walk away. Don't stay there and waste a year, 2 years, 3 years, and pay the repercussions for being in a situation is not right.
Yeah, man. Walk in integrity, right? Hey, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you for listening. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. This is great stuff. Thank you for sticking with us. I know we went long, but this is good stuff. Have a good week. Thanks, JT. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, you're welcome, man.
Hey, everyone. I wanted to let you know about an upcoming conference that really had a huge impact on me, that's helped me on my journey and helped me to really understand metabolic health and what we're doing to make people healthier. And so I have my friend Doug Reynolds, who's the boss, who's putting on this conference. So Doug, tell us about the conference that's coming up, Low Carb USA, San Diego. I love it because it's right next to my house and I get to sleep in my own bed and come, but maybe I get to stay in a hotel this time. I don't know. And I get to speak. So, man, it's awesome that we get to all meet up together and build community. We all know how important that is. So, Doug, welcome. Tell people about what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Brian. It's really exciting to be able to do it in person again. I think there's so many people out there that are just clamoring to be able to talk to people again and give someone a hug and just collaborate like has become so predominant in all the other events that we've done before this COVID thing hit. One of the things that's come up since when COVID hit, we couldn't do it. So then we flipped over and did virtual versions of the San Diego event and the Boca one. And we had a lot of people actually sign up and become a part of that. And so what it has done for us now is make us understand that the live stream component can be very effective for people that can't make it to the event. So this is a proper live event, and I think I want to make this very clear to people that I think they think it's like that. So many people have asked how many of the talks are going to be virtual and how many are going to be in person, and the answer is every single one is going to be in person. So we will have a live stream component. People will be able to access it via live stream, but all the speakers will be there in person. Anybody that hasn't been able to make it obviously just hasn't made it into the lineup. And I think that's really important, and it's really exciting that we've got all of these people coming out, and some really good names. Gary Taubes has been a stalwart with us. He's like always supported us. The first guy to say, let's do this. You obviously, Rob Sivers, Tro, Tony Hampton, Brett Scher, Dr. Ben, Amy Berger, Diana Rogers. I'm really excited that she's, on the sustainability side. I'm really excited that she's able to make it this time. We've been trying to get her to an event of ours for a while. And this is the first time. Andrea Salcido is a really, really amazing. She did one of the Grand Rounds talks for our SMHP. And she's a gynecologist. We've had a lot of comments from people from the feedback forms and stuff saying that you should get a gynecologist in. So now we have. Michelle Hearn was a potentially Olympic athlete who just like crashed and burned on carbs. And she's a dietitian, and she found keto and eventually basically carnivore, and it's cured her to the extent where she's training for the Olympics again. But she wrote this book called Dietitian's Dilemma, because everything that she'd learned as a dietitian she wasn't doing anymore in order to make herself healthy again. And so it's really cool to have a real dietitian's perspective of the problems that they have. She's basically left that vocation because she just couldn't function in the hospital environment, and that where she was. She was not allowed to speak to people about low carb. And so that's a fascinating story. Dr. Gurpreet Pada, I think you might have even had him on.
Yeah, he's doing amazing stuff with pain management.
He's just one of the most incredible people.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Marco Kozella is I don't think
he's a legend.
At least in this one.
Yeah, he's a legend. I worked with him in deprescribing the textbook chapter, and he's phenomenal. And he's struggled with metabolic disease, even though he's a long distance runner, and he was able to get soda out of the hospitals he's affiliated with, and that's a huge task.
Yeah,
that's a huge money maker. So yeah, so many great people, and I think the big thing is just being able to sit down. I know. For me, being at Low Carb USA, the first time I was able to sit down and have a cup of coffee with some great leaders that were just there, and they just are there to talk. And so there's so much great information. Anyone else we need to talk about, Doug?
Well, Steve Finney is the latest addition to the lineup. I've been chatting with him for a while now, managed to get him on board. Dave Feldman as well. He wasn't sure if he was going to be able to talk because of this research that he's got going on, that he might not have been able to actually speak in public. Arthur Agathton, I think, is going to be fascinating. I did a podcast interview with him the other day. I didn't even know until very recently, but he's the guy that discovered or defined the calcium score. It's actually known as
his name.
Yeah.
And the South Beach diet. He's done so much work. I mean, he's always trying to make people healthy. He's doing a lot. Yeah. So yeah, it's just great the amount of talent you pulled in.
And we've got amazing. The whole, for those people that know about the SMHP, which is kind of the other hat that I put on, the other organization that I run, that nonprofit, pretty much the entire board of directors for that is going to be at this event, either speaking or at least present. And then, the other committees, we've got the panel of advisors for the clinical guidelines. You're on that panel. It's just, there are so many, it's just going to be so many fascinating conversations that are going to go on over that weekend. I can't wait.
Yeah, and and you're also bringing a lot of vendors, like Keto Mojo is always there, and a lot of good people. Yeah. And so try different products, and there's some great Restore program who's doing some great work through your program and really getting it out to the masses. There's so many great people coming out, so I would highly recommend it. And I worked out a deal with Doug because I want people that sometimes finance is a issue for people. So I said, Doug, look, my people need a discount. Our people need a discount. So what do you work out for us, Doug?
So yeah, we've got it. If you use the code Low Carb MD, it gives you 20% off and it's not just the ticket. For those people that sign up for the dinners, for those people that require a CME certificate, whatever they add, whatever their purchase is, the total amount, that 20% comes off that total. In the past, when we gave discounts, it came just off the ticket price. But it's not that great a guy. It's actually just that it's easier for me to manage. To take it off the total, but yeah, as a result, everyone else
great.
Scores, right? So
that helps too. And then is that for people who come in person and online also?
Correct. Yeah. Right. So whatever is in your cart, basically, that discount comes off the total. And the other thing is, one of the options in the upgrade option. So if you only buy the ticket now, you can upgrade and buy the VIP dinners later if you want to join us. Or you can, if you signed up for the live stream and you wanted to upgrade to in person, because now you realize, hey, everybody's traveling and actually I think I can do this. Then you can still use that code on your upgrade options as well. So you can still get 20% off if you decide later. So if you buy the live stream and later, in beginning of August, you decide you want to actually come in person, you can utilize that code again then for the upgrades, and they'll apply, which doesn't happen for anybody else. So.
And what are the dates?
26th to 29th of August.
Awesome. And it'll be live. And if you want to stay in your hotel, I think, can you live stream it from your computer, wherever you're at?
Yeah. So that's the thing, is it didn't used to be like that either, but I think every time we do this, we improve it. So now somebody that's in person has access to the live stream as well. So if they want to watch part of it, in their room or something, they can. We would really prefer that they come down and sit in the audience. But if for some reason that's not possible, they can watch it, or they miss something, they can go and watch. They can go back and watch that evening or something. They can watch a talk that they missed or something like that. And then they get access. They get access to those recordings after the event, and then within about 2 weeks, we normally are able to get all the individual videos of the talks populated on that site as well, and they have access to that forever. So
yeah, it's great education. I think being able to, because even being there, I've had times where I want to interview someone or to spend time with someone because they're coming from South Africa or something, and I miss a talk, and I was like, oh shoot, I want to see that one. And so it really does free you up to say, okay, I'll hybrid. You can sit and go down. You can talk to people. You can watch it later that night or on the weekend, because a lot of us are really busy. So that is outstanding. I'm really glad. That's a huge improvement for sure. And and some of those talks, you're going to want to watch it a couple of times to make sure you absorb it all, so you don't have to feel like you have to take notes. And Doug hates people taking pictures in the meetings, and because it's distracting for people behind them. So you'll have access to the talk, the PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's really huge. So hey everyone, thank you. I think this is a huge thing. The reason I had Doug on, we have no financial interests. It's really just because I know the benefit of this and how it can help people trying to live a better life and getting on track. And I know it helped me immensely and changed the course of my life, really. So Doug, thanks for all you're doing and continue to do, and you're making a massive impact. So Low Carb USA San Diego, I would highly recommend everyone come out.
Appreciate that, Brian, and thank you for what you're doing. I mean, it all started at one of our meetings many years ago, but I'm so glad that you made it to that meeting, because you're doing great things now too. Thank you.
Hey, I get some good South African food out of it sometimes, so it's all good. So hey everyone, hey, thank you for listening, and thank you for your continued support. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.